Pero ahora con todo esto de internet y más con 5G por acá la pregunta y todas, tranquila, todas estas replicaciones, todas estas ideas se están conociendo y transportando de una manera rapidísima. Entonces lo que está sucediendo también, y hay un libro alrededor de Abundance muy interesante que habla de eso, es cómo toda esta información está fluyendo a segundos y cómo muchas personas inclusive ni siquiera están inventando, creando algo nuevo, sino están de lo que ya se creó, cómo le adapto o creo algo on top of it y lo mejoro en función de esa experiencia del cliente, ¿no? Hablamos hoy de la parte de movilidad, hablamos de la parte también Netflix. Netflix, el ejemplo, Netflix primero salió sacando un catálogo de películas que tenías que escoger en un mes y que aleatoriamente te manejaba algunas. Pero ¿qué fue lo que transformó? No fue en sí las películas, fue la experiencia que te daba de ir, ¿sí? Y curiosamente eso es lo que están transformando ahorita todas estas nuevas empresas. Sí, la parte de innovación, pero es esa experiencia del cliente que es en ese círculo de lo que marcó, donde la experiencia y el cliente está en el centro de cómo es lo que estás transformando para poder innovar y poder mantenerte competitivamente o poder sobrevivir en un mercado muy disruptivo, ¿no?
The real point here is to understand that it's actually not about the technology per se, right? And in fact, some of the most disruptive companies that we might talk about today, the poster children for digital disruption and digital transformation are things like, you know, Airbnb and Uber and these guys. And if you look at their technology, other than that they've had to innovate to deal with the scale, the core technology itself was nothing that dramatic. It was that they approached the experience differently, and that they used the technology that they had to do that. And so the big key, I think, for organizations, and this is I believe actually an opportunity in Latin America or in a lot of places where there's an opportunity to kind of leapfrog, I think, is that you don't have to be the most technologically innovative organization to create a game-changing innovation. And in many cases, it's about applying design thinking principles, so Stanford Design School, where it's really about looking at the customer first, this customer-centric view of the world, and then asking yourself, how can I transform their experience? And then going and finding the technologies to do it. Now, if you have to go create technology to do it, then great. But in many cases, it's about assembling the stuff that's already there. And so it's, the Dells of the world are really going to be the suppliers of all of this transformation. And you're not going to, Dell is going to willfully sell to every single one of your competitors, right? If you're a company. So everyone has access to the same technology. So the key differentiator as an organization is how can you assemble that technology in a way that uniquely satisfies a need for your customer that nobody else does. And that's really the key driver, is just getting the order right. And that's where this whole conversation about creativity, imagination, empathy becomes important. You cannot create something for your customer if you're not empathetic with them. And one little other tidbit that I sometimes talk about is that it's also important that you also can't ask your customer that, right? So Steve Jobs was famous, if you remember when the iPad came out, I actually have the magazine cover. Basically, it was like, have we not heard of Newton, right? Because every time anyone tried to do a tablet, they failed miserably. iPad comes out and was wildly successful. So this reporter sits and asks Steve Jobs, so what information did you have from your customers that told you that this was going to be the key? And Steve Jobs famously said, he says, none. It's not the customer's job to know what they want, right? It was his job, or Apple's job, to innovate, to be empathetic, to understand what they needed that they couldn't even articulate, and then assemble the technology to deliver that experience. And that's what Apple has historically done great, and what I think every great company we see today is doing. So I talk to too many companies, but for instance, there is a company that is using AI to listen to live audio streams like at a call center. And it is specifically designed to then give the call center agent a pop-up screen to effectively cue them to things like empathy. It says, the caller sounds agitated, perhaps you should try this, or you're talking very fast, which can cause anxiety in the other person, right? So it's this really fascinating application of technology to address some of these very human concerns. I think we've not seen a lot of it yet. Even if I get very frustrated when I talk to companies that are talking about the customer experience, and the customer experience in their mind tends to translate into the sales cycle. right? And they're not dealing with the totality of the experience and those very human interactions we have throughout the life cycle of engagement. So I think we're starting to see some change, but frankly, I think almost every tech company has an opportunity to start looking at the world a bit differently. I'm very encouraged, by the way, about the messaging that Dell is putting out there today about this entire event that is addressing some of that, right? Because it's a very important thing that I think most tech companies are not yet addressing fully. Talk about women in technology. The first is that we need to kill the myth that somehow women can't do the technical aspects of it. Some of the most technical people I know, in fact, are women, and I've learned so much. I think the gap on that level is really an educational gap. As some of what you were talking about, is that we need to encourage them and kind of overcome some of those stigmas. But even more broadly than that, I think what is fascinating is, and this is what I was talking about, there's really two elements. One is just the diversity of experience. This isn't really even a female thing, this is just having diversity of culture, race, gender, all of it in a room when you're trying to innovate and be creative, it's going to create a better result, period. And there's a ton of data now that demonstrates this. And so we should be encouraging it just for that fact is that we're going to get that exposure that we need. And then I think the last thing that's really fascinating, and I'll, by the way, my day job is I'm an industry analyst, so I can address questions around a whole range of technology trends as well. But one of the things that's fascinating is we still see the vast majority of the founders that we get briefed by are still men. And all the stuff that I was talking about today as far as the shift where it's now about the experience, where there's almost always a gap, is in their ability to get beyond the technology and be focused on the experience. And I actually think, again, I hate to paint with any broad strokes here, but generally speaking, women have a higher degree of humility, a higher attentiveness to those types of aspects that I think is critical. So if I'm right now looking at how I create an experientially driven advantage for an organization, tech or otherwise, if you don't have women, but everybody involved in that process, I think you're setting yourselves up. And then we see that all the time where these men founders, and they don't have it, right? They haven't built that diversity, and as a result, they may have great technology, but they're pigeonholed.